Hi there, my name is Zane Olson, and I'm the maker of a video called Star Wars Relic, which in the last little while, for whatever reason, has really started to take off. So I thought it'd be fun and maybe interesting on the channel to document some of the making of for part two. Doing some Blender stuff. So today I'm going to go over really quickly how to create a character in HumanGen and how to get as much as you can from this already great plugin. So let's get started. So once you install HumanGen, you'll see it pop up over here in your add-on tabs. So for the character that I want to create, this is kind of like a Force priest sort of. So in the story for part two, the relic that is referred to in the title wasn't introduced in part one, but in part two it will be introduced, and this is a character that's kind of guarding it. So we want a character that's got kind of a wizened look to him, something that's a little bit, somebody that's been there for a long time. The original inspiration was the Last Crusade Grail Keeper, but I think I kind of want to go in a different direction for that. So as a starting human, I'm just going to pick this guy here and generate new human. So once you have your human generated, you can see here that you've got a mesh and a really simple bone structure set up. So I'm just going to go over here to material preview. And then there's a few things that I'm going to turn off in the viewport overlays. I'm going to turn off extras. I'm going to turn off relationship lines. And for right now, I'm going to turn off bones. So this way we can just see the character as he loads in. So first things first is to start adjusting this character as we want. One thing that you might notice is a little bit of ghosting on the image when you move them around, and that's a EV setting. So you jump over here to your render settings. You can turn off viewport denoising, and that will just give you a little bit of a crisper image while you work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this ghost up here on the HumanGen options, and that's going to bring up experimental. So now we can really push this character into weird places, really strange proportions. We can get real weird with it. Push things definitely away from the realistic areas. But I haven't entirely decided if this is a human character yet or an alien character. I'm leaning towards a human character, and that's because the antagonist in part two is a alien character that I'll show you in another video. So I think we're just going to want to go with a human style character. So this guy, he's been keeping this relic for who knows how long. So definitely want to make him skinnier. Also, the skinnier the shape of the body, the better you're gonna have with the clothing options later on. The HumanGen's got a lot of great clothing options, but sometimes the body proportions, especially if it's a built character, can really start messing around with those. So that's experimentation you're probably gonna have to do on your own. But for this character, makes a lot of sense for him to be thin. We're going to go into individual scaling here, and we're going to bring the chest in as well, and the hips. So when we get some of the cloth simulations with the cloak that we're going to make for him, we're going to have some good interaction there. I want to bring the neck in a little bit as well, and so in HumanGen here, even with experimental turn on, the slider for the neck doesn't quite go far enough. So you can go into negative values. If you go in too far, weird stuff starts to happen. But as you start bringing that back to more reasonable levels, even if they are still in the negative, then you can get something that's a little bit closer to real without pushing it too far. I think I want to make his hands a little bit smaller as well. I find that HumanGen characters, the fingers are spread out a little bit too much for... There we go. For that, there are edits we can make to the mesh after we're done the creation phase. So we might go into that later. So for now, I think we're just going to leave the height at default. Go into the face, and this is where the fun begins. So I like to center things on the eyes so that the pivot point stays relatively within the face area. Another thing you can do is you can jump into edit mode, select a vertice for the middle of the nose, and then jump back, and then you'll be locked onto that point. So for right now, I'm also going to go up and disable outline selected, so that way I can just get a very clean look at how this is going to work. All right, so upper skull, I mean, it's, the default values are probably fine. This, generally what head shapes are, but I do want to make this guy a little bit more sunken in. So you'll notice in the face sliders, you can't go into negative numbers. You're locked in to where these are. You can, however, after the creation phase, go in and sculpt and edit the mesh in traditional ways to get whatever look you want. I'm going to bring the brow ridge down a little bit. I find that kind of gives a more intense look to the eyes when the eyebrows are a little bit closer. Don't want to push it too far though. And we're just going to leave everything else. The eyes, so there's lots of options here. A lot of this stuff, if you push too far, especially all the way to one side, you'll get really weird interaction with the face rig later on. That can give you a lot of problems. So I'd recommend just being a little bit more conservative with it. And if you want to change things later, do it in the sculpt phase. I'm going to make the orbit size, however, quite large. Give him a little bit of sunken eyes. You see what I mean when you can get weird interaction? So the mesh right now has started to kind of double in on itself, which is something that you want to avoid. So just make sure that these are within reasonable values, because you want everything to make sense when he blinks. And you never know how close you're going to get on this character. I'm probably not going to have an extreme close-up like this, but you never know. Probably just going to leave the ears the way they are. One thing, as characters get older, and this character doesn't have a defined age, but in my mind I'm thinking, late 70s or late 60s, early 70s. The nose and the ears tend to keep growing, or at least proportionally are larger on older people. So I don't want to push this too far, into like comical, but I think having a little bit more pronounced ears probably works for this character. Let's go into the nose. So the first thing I want to do is I do want to bring the nose out a little bit and down, and probably play around with the tip size. So to kind of get an idea, because the proportions are starting to get a little weird, I'm going to jump into the skin tab first, and I'm going to go down to age, and I'm going to bring the skin sagging and the wrinkles all the way up. And now all of a sudden things start to kind of work a little bit better together, and that's because we're used to seeing larger ears and larger noses proportionally on characters who are older. So I'm also at this point going to change the default skin to 8K. So you select the 8K library, and then you can go in here and select amongst the various skin options that are available. All right, let's go back into the face. I'm going to work on some other areas before I start backtracking on myself. So probably the cheeks, I'm going to bring the fullness in, get a little bit of that gaunt look going on. These options here are for cheekbones, and you want to be careful there because you can start to get a really Gollum-y look really quick. So probably don't want to push those too far too quickly. Everything else is just a matter of playing around with. I'm going to bring the back here down a little bit, get a little bit of that old man jaw going on, and I'm going to bring the width up, I think a little bit, or maybe down. We'll see. That looks all right. Chin, I just want to balance that a little bit more to what the face shape is. Cool. I'm going to go back up to the nose. I'm going to increase the bridge just a little bit. Let's go into the eyes. I think we'll keep the eyes pretty close. Just make them a little bit darker. I have a scene in mind where there's firelight, and I really want to be able to see those reflections well in his eyes. And also just to make him look a little bit older, we're going to darken the sclera color a little bit, or push it into the yellows, and then just bring a little bit of that whiteness out. I'm going to keep him without any hair because mostly because there's going to be some wind and some fabric simulations, and if I do it with fabric, you gotta do it with hair, and that's just an extra step that can be avoided, so I'm just gonna go ahead and avoid it. I am gonna give him some facial hair though. So long stubble, let's try that. And then I'm going to, you can play around with some of these sliders to get a little bit more variation going on. I'm probably going to delete the soul patch, which is right there, because it's just giving me a little bit of funky vibes. Hair material, I'm going to go into accurate, so that's a cycles only feature. So I am going to, at this point, jump into cycles. I'm also going to bring up the shader editor and jump into the world settings, and then I'm going to make this black, and then I'm going to turn off the grid and the floor and the X and the Y axis, and then at this point I'm just going to bring in some lights to just light our character so we can get a look at how things are working. So at this point I'm still in Eevee just so that I can very quickly see how things are working. Turn extras on at this point. And I'm just going to do a really quick studio style setup. So studio style setups are very dependent on the photographer. I worked as a photographer for a number of years, so I've got some settings and some things of mine that I like, but I recommend just playing around with the look, because it's gonna be different for every project. And at this point, I'm also not looking to light the character in a in a beautiful way. This is all about being able to see detail. This is all about being able to see as I work. So let's bring this guy up. We can probably, at this point, switch on over to cycles. GPU compute. There's a couple things I like to change right away once I'm in the render settings so that I don't forget later on. First things are down in performance. I like to turn on persistent data and turn off use tiling. Make sure motion blur is turned on. In the advanced options under render, click this button here. This animates the noise pattern. So even if you have low samples, at least the noise shifts from frame to frame and can make things look a lot more natural. Under light paths, we don't need as many light paths as we're looking at right now. These don't make a ton of difference in rendering, especially a scene like this. You can see things are, this is 4,000 or 1,000 samples done in like a matter of seconds. I am using a 3090 Ti, so your results may vary, but generally speaking, not a huge difference. But because the scene is going to get more complicated as things go on, I'm just going to change the total number of bounces to 6, and I'm going to go down to transmission, make that 6, and transparent 6 as well. And I'm also going to turn off reflective and refractive caustics because definitely don't need those. Later on, I might turn on fast GI approximation and bump these up both to 2, but for now it's not really making a difference, so I'm just going to leave it as is. But right now we can see the hair material a lot better. I'm going to draw a box here so it loads almost instantly. I go back and forth between turning on denoising for the viewport. It kind of depends on what I'm doing. On something like this, like I don't really see the point. Things just resolve a little bit slower, and I get plenty of speed doing this, but that's up to you. So down here in the hair material, I'm going to go to facial hair. I'm going to turn up salt and pepper all the way so that we get some black and white. I'm going to turn the lightness up as well, but as you can see, when you turn the lightness up, it actually turns blonde, and it's because the redness settings are all the way up. If you bring the redness settings down, then lightness goes from black to white, which makes more sense for this character. And I'm going to turn the roughness up a little bit, just like that. So later on, I'm going to go in and adjust the actual particle properties after the creation phase, but that's a little bit later on the line, so we'll get to that when we get to that. I might now as well also bring up the beard length. I wasn't totally planning on doing this, but both the characters in the scene, the guy who keeps the relic and the antagonist character, both have no hair, and they both have no hair for the same reason. The other character is a non-human character, so it makes a little bit more sense. But I want this character to stand out and their humanness a little bit more. So I might add, you know what? I might add hair. Let's see here. What can we get? Buzz cut curly. Yeah. And then bring the hair length down here. So that's a lot more natural. Yeah. That's looking pretty good. And then I think after the creation phase, I'm also going to go into the weight painting, and I'm going to bring the hairline back because this is a pretty youthful hairline. So let's jump back into cycles, take a look at how things are coming along. In the hair settings, I'm going to bring up salt and pepper. Actually, I'm going to bring down salt and pepper a little bit. Yeah. Bring up the lightness just a touch, and then bring the redness down and the roughness up. Might bring down the lightness a little bit more. It makes sense for this guy to have a little bit more darker hair on top. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Let's see if we can match the beard with the mustache. Yeah, we'll bring the sidelines up a little bit too. That's the connective area between the beard and the mustache. I think this is gonna be a guy that's been here for a while. This part of his grooming isn't necessarily prioritized, so he's gonna be a little scruffy. Might want to take a look at the eyebrows as well. If you want to see what number eyebrows you're on, you can jump over here to your particle properties, expand this out, and as you cycle through the different eyebrows, you'll see different options over here get toggled on and off, so you can compare. So right here, for instance, that is eyebrows number 7, which I think have a really intense look to them. I really like that, so we'll keep 7 in mind. Yeah, I think we're gonna go with 7. Yeah. Perfect. All right. Jump back into cycles here. Back into the hair settings. Want the eyebrows to match, so we're gonna go down to eyebrows, bring the lightness up just a touch, bring the roughness down, or the redness down, and the roughness up a little bit. Yeah. Cool. I'm just going to take a quick look, see how everything looks with all of the beard settings at max. See, that looks pretty good too, but I think there might be grooming issues later on and interaction with wind and that kind of thing, so I think I'm just going to keep things right around here. Maybe bring the sideburns in just a touch as well. Yeah. And the beard as well. Getting some... All this stuff can be combed and groomed later as well, so it's not a huge deal how things are looking right now, because that's all easily adjustable. But I like to get it as close as I can in this stage, just so that things kind of work well together. All right, cool. So here's our relic keeper, and that's all the settings here. So at this point, it might make sense to jump back into the face settings and play around with things now that there's different elements working. But I think this character is pretty much good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish creation phase. It asks for confirmation because you can go back, but when you go back, you lose all of the changes that you made after this. All right. So if you're watching this and wondering where the hair went, that's because the hair children have been hidden. You can toggle them on and off up here, but basically it's just a way to keep the viewport nice and responsive. Two things first here is I like to go into pose, rigify, generate rigify rig. And when you turn, you can toggle bones back on. You can see now you have a full rigify rig, which is fantastic. And then I also like to go into expressions, face rig, add face rig. So now we can animate the face using the face rig instead of the built-in one-click blend shapes. I think this is just a better option when you're trying to get better interaction. So if you select the rig, you can hit Control Tab, and that will bring you into pose mode. Some of the bones are hidden. Specifically, the bone that opens up the mouth is going to be hidden. So you can go over to your object data properties, and under viewport display, just click in front, and that way all of the bones will show up. So anything hidden, you'll have easy access to. So as you can see, this is a pretty great rig that this generates. Everything has really good interaction. And at this point, if you're in object mode, you can select your character and just make sure that under shape keys, you have basis selected. If you jump into sculpt mode, you can start adding features. So if you wanted a character that had, say, horns sticking up from his head, you could do that at this phase, and that will interact with everything that's already attached to the rig. For this character, I definitely don't want horns, so I'm going to go ahead and undo to that point. But what I think I am going to do is work on the hairline. So under the particle properties here, I'm just going to go ahead and turn everything off except the hair. I'm going to go into the hair under the children's settings, and I'm going to bring up the display amount to, let's say, 60. Yeah, 60 gives us a good view. So 200 is what it will render at. So this is how much hair he's going to have on his head at the rendering stage. But of course you can play around with that so that things are a little bit more responsive. So I'm going to go down to vertex groups, and I'm going to take a look and see which weight paint is dictating the hair density, and that's hair scalp full. So I'm going to go over to weight paint, and under the object data properties here, hair scalp full right there. That right there is your hair properties. So I'm going to go up to subtract. I'm going to make sure that symmetry is on, and I'm just going to start, probably a little bit bigger of a brush, start painting his hairline back a little bit. All right, I think that kind of works. Let's take a look. Yeah, definitely got more of that widow's peak going on, which is good. I'm going to go back to these settings and just turn everything on, and I'm going to double click the hair children visible button, just bring everything back. So now I can get a little bit better of a look to see how things are playing into. So I think what I want to work on next is the hair length. I think this fade is a little bit too perfect, a little bit too barbery. So I'm going to make sure that the rest of these are disabled so that I can work a little bit faster. I'm going to turn this back to 60. I'm just going to clock the name of the vertex group that dictates the length of the hair, which is hair fade high. Jump on over to weight paint and select hair fade high. So now you can see that's what we're working with. So I'm just going to go to add, and all I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to trace out the areas. If you start painting where there is no hair in the density paint, nothing's going to happen because the density is first. This is just dictating the length. So you can be a little bit messier with this one. Another thing you can do after you've painted an area, if you're trying to get a middle length, is you can select the average button over here, and the average will start to kind of eat into things a little bit, but make it all so that the wherever you paint over will have this same average weight paint, which is really useful, especially when you're painting hair on the face like peach fuzz. That can be very, very useful. Let's jump in object mode. Yeah, that's a little bit more, it's reading a little bit more naturally for me. Gonna go over here, turn all this stuff back on so we can get a look, and then jump into cycles rendered view to get a good idea. All right. So that's it for part 1. In part 2, we're going to go over cloth and cloth physics, how to optimize that using the options that are built into HumanGen. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.